The boy walked straight past every empty seat in that diner and stopped at the most dangerous man in Nevada, rain dripping off his chin, shoes held together with electrical tape, his little sister locked onto the back of his shirt like letting go meant dying. Every trucker froze. Every waitress stopped breathing. The boy looked at the untouched plate sitting across from Jack Thorne, the man who had put grown men in the hospital for making eye contact too long, and said it quiet and plain as a prayer. "Can we eat your leftovers, boss?" The jukebox died, and Jack did something nobody in that room ever expected. Jack Thorne had not spoken to another human being before noon in 11 years. That was a choice, not a personality flaw. He had made the choice the same morning he signed the divorce papers, packed a single duffel bag, and drove his Harley out of Reno without looking in the rearview mirror once. 11 years of mornings that belonged only to him. Coffee, engine grease, silence. But Friday nights were different. Every Friday night for going on 6 years, Jack walked into Betty's Desert Stop, a roadside diner that smelled like burnt coffee and pie crust and old cigarette smoke baked into the walls. And he sat in the same corner booth, and he ordered the same two meals. Chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and gravy. Twice. Same booth, same order, same time. 8 o'clock sharp, he ate one plate. The second plate sat untouched across from him until Betty cleared it away at the end of the night. Nobody asked. Betty Whitlock had learned early that questions she didn't need the answers to were questions best left unasked. The truckers who stopped in knew who Jack was. They kept their eyes forward. The two county deputies who occasionally came in for pie always chose the counter stools rather than a booth. Sitting in a booth meant sitting with your back to something, and nobody with a functioning instinct for self-preservation was going to put their back to anything when Jack Thorne was in the room. Jack was 6'4" and built like something that had survived things that should have killed it. His hands were the size of catcher's mitts. His forearms were covered in tattoos that told a story if you could read that language, which most people couldn't, and the rest didn't want to. His beard had gone mostly gray in the last 3 years. His face carried the kind of deep lines that come not from age but from a specific quality of hard living. Cold blue eyes that never seemed to move even when he was looking directly at you. The leather vest he wore had a patch on the back. Iron Vultures MC, Nevada president. He had led the Iron Vultures for 19 years. Before that, he had ridden with 3 other clubs, been arrested 8 times, convicted twice, and had done a combined 6 years in 2 different Nevada state prisons. His reputation was not a rumor or an exaggeration. People in this part of the desert genuinely believed he was capable of things that most men only saw in nightmares. And yet every Friday night he ordered 2 plates and ate one and said nothing about the other. That particular Friday in October of 1998 was the worst storm to hit the Nevada desert in 14 years. Betty had called it early, told her waitress Sandra to head home before the roads got bad. That left Betty herself running the counter alone, which she had done 1,000 times and didn't complain about. 3 truckers were stuck at the counter waiting for the storm to ease. An old couple had been sitting in the far booth nursing decaf for 2 hours because they were afraid to drive in the lightning. And Jack was in his corner. His untouched second plate exactly where Sandra had placed it an hour ago. Betty watched the door. It blew open at 8:47. Not from the wind, though the wind was bad enough to rattle every window in the building. The door blew open because a child hit it with both hands and fell through it. A boy, thin, maybe 11 years old, soaked to the bone. His shoes were held together with electrical tape. Behind him came a smaller figure, a little girl, maybe 7, wearing a rain poncho 2 sizes too big and nothing on her feet but socks that had turned gray from the road. She was holding onto the back of the boy's shirt with both fists. The way a person grabs something when they are absolutely certain that letting go means dying. The boy caught himself on the door frame and looked up. The diner was small. There was nowhere to look that wasn't someone. The truckers at the counter, the old couple, Betty and Jack. Betty was already moving toward them. Lord have mercy, babies, get in here. We're not begging. The boy said it immediately. His voice was steadier than it had any right to be. He said it like he had been accused of it before, like he had practiced saying it. We're not begging for anything. We just need to get out of the rain. Betty stopped. She looked at him for a moment with the kind of look that a woman who had raised 4 kids and buried one husband gives a child who has been taught to apologize for existing. Honey, she said, I didn't say you were. The boy's jaw tightened. He pulled his sister inside and let the door shut behind them. They stood on the linoleum and water pooled around their feet. The little girl buried her face against her brother's arm and wouldn't look up. Can we sit anywhere, he asked. Sit wherever you like, sweetheart. Let me get you something warm. We don't have money for food. I didn't ask you about money. That stopped him. He looked at Betty for a long moment, calculating something. Then he looked around the diner. His eyes moved across the truckers, the old couple, and then they landed on Jack. And they stayed there. Jack was watching him the same way he watched everything. Steady, flat, giving nothing away. The kind of attention that most people mistook for disinterest until they realized he hadn't blinked once. The boy looked at Jack. Then he looked at the untouched plate of food sitting across from him. Chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, gravy, steam still rising off it. Jack saw the exact moment the boy's hunger overrode his caution. It wasn't a small thing to watch. It was something that moved through the boy's whole body. This war between pride and desperation. And the desperation won so completely that his face went almost blank with it. The boy walked across the diner. He stopped at Jack's booth. Up close, Jack could see things he hadn't been able to see from across the room. A bruise along the boy's jaw, faded yellow-green, old enough to be a week or two healed. Another one on his forearm, darker, shaped wrong. Not the kind of bruise you get from falling. The boy's hands were chapped raw from cold. His lips were cracked from dehydration. He had been out in that storm for a very long time. Jack waited. The boy looked at this plate, then at Jack, then at the plate again. Can we eat your leftovers, boss? The diner didn't just go quiet, it went still. One of the truckers actually put his fork down. Betty stopped moving behind the counter. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Jack looked at the boy for a long moment. Long enough that the boy's shoulders started to pull up toward his ears. That old animal reflex, making yourself smaller before the hit comes. Jack picked up his coffee cup, took a slow sip, set it down. And then he reached across and slid the second plate to the edge of the table nearest the booth seat across from him. Leftovers are scraps, he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel in a coffee can. Sit down and eat like human beings. The boy didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Then he turned back to his sister and said, Lily, come on. The little girl Lily crossed the diner, still holding her brother's shirt. She climbed into the booth beside him. And then the two of them looked at the plate between them with an expression Jack recognized from a place he hadn't visited in a very long time. They were so hungry that the sight of food had made them afraid. He knew that feeling. He knew exactly what it was. It was the feeling of someone who had learned that good things appearing suddenly usually meant something worse was about to follow. It was the learned fear of relief. Eat, Jack said. Not unkindly, just plain. The boy picked up a fork, and they ate. Betty appeared at the table with 2 glasses of milk and a look on her face that she aimed at Jack. Soft, complicated. Something between gratitude and grief. Jack ignored it. He drank his coffee and looked out the window at the storm and let the kids eat without staring at them. But he was paying attention. He noticed that the boy Colton, he would find out later, the name came out between bites when Betty asked, cut the steak into pieces before pushing half toward his sister without even thinking about it. An automatic gesture. He had been feeding her first for a long time. He noticed that Lily ate with one hand and kept the other hand tucked in Colton's sleeve the entire time. Like an anchor. He noticed that Colton positioned himself so that he was between Lily and the door. He noticed the bruise on Lily's forearm, too, when she had pulled up her wet sleeve to reach across the plate. Same wrong shape as Colton's. Jack set his coffee down. "Where are you from?" he asked. Colton looked up, measured the question. "East of here." "How far east?" A pause. "Far enough." Jack nodded once. He didn't push. He picked up his coffee and looked out the window again. But somewhere in his chest, something that had been sitting very still for a very long time had started to move. Betty brought a second plate without being asked. Another chicken fried steak, paid for from the register, which meant paid for from Betty's own pocket, and set it between them. Colton looked up at her. "We told you we don't have, and I told you I didn't ask," Betty said. She put her hand briefly on top of his head, the way a grandmother does, and he went completely rigid. Then she walked back to the counter. Jack watched Colton's reaction. The boy had flinched, just slightly, but enough. When Betty's hand had come toward his head, his whole body had prepared for impact. Jack put his own mug down on the table with a careful, deliberate slowness. "Hey," he said. Colton looked at him. "How long were you walking?" Silence. Lily looked at her brother. Colton looked at the table. Then he said, "We left around noon." Jack did the math. It was nearly 9 o'clock. 9 hours in a desert storm. In this weather, it wasn't raining when we left. "Where were you headed?" Another pause. Longer this time. Colton's fingers found his fork, and he turned it over once, twice. "There's a shelter in Millerton. Someone told our mom about it." "Millerton's 40 miles west, I know. You were going to walk 40 miles. I know how far it is." Jack looked at him for a long moment. "You got somewhere to sleep tonight." Colton's jaw set. "We'll figure it out." "That's not what I asked." The boy met his eyes and held them. And Jack had the sudden, distinct impression that this child had learned very early how to look at dangerous men without showing fear. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because showing fear had taught him that things got worse. "We're fine," Colton said. Jack said nothing for a moment. "What's your mother's name?" Something flickered across Colton's face. "Fast. Gone. Why?" "Because you mentioned her. What's her name, Sarah? Where is Sarah right now?" Colton looked down at his plate. He cut a small piece of steak and put it in front of Lily. She ate it. "She told us to go," he said finally. "She said to get to Millerton and find the shelter and tell them her name, and she'd come when she could, when she could." Jack repeated, "Yes, sir, sir." Jack couldn't remember the last time a child had called him sir. He wasn't sure any child ever had. "Why couldn't she come with you?" Colton was quiet for a long time, long enough that the truckers had gone back to their food, and the old couple had finally paid and shuffled out, and Betty had turned down the lights at the counter to their late-night dim. Then Colton said, "Because if she tried to leave with us, he would have stopped her." Jack felt something turn over in his chest. "He?" Jack said. "Yes, sir. Who is he?" Colton set down his fork. He looked at Jack with eyes that were too old for his face. "His name is Vincent Merrick," Colton said. The name landed in the booth between them like something dropped from a height. Jack's face didn't change. He was good at that. Had spent decades training his face to do what he wanted it to do. But underneath that surface calm, something cold moved through him. He knew that name, not personally, but in the way that every person in this county who had ears knew that name. Vincent Merrick ran distribution for a meth operation that covered 4 counties. His protection came from 2 sources: the money he paid to certain deputies in the sheriff's office, and the simple fact that the people who might have testified against him had a way of deciding they didn't want to testify. Jack had never had business with Merrick. Their worlds had overlapped at the margins. The Iron Vultures moved it in a different economy than Merrick's operation, and Jack had kept it that way deliberately. But looking at this boy across a diner booth with his taped-together shoes and his split lip and his little sister who wouldn't let go of his sleeve, Jack felt something shift in his thinking that he hadn't expected. "How long?" Jack asked. Colton understood the question. 3 years, he said. since he moved in. And your mother, has she tried to get out before Colton looked away? Out the window, the rain hammered against the glass. 3 times, he said. Jack waited. The first time she called the police. Deputy Carson came. He and Vincent went out on the porch and talked for about 10 minutes. And then Carson left. And Vincent came back inside. Colton paused. She didn't call the police after that. Jack's hand tightened around his coffee mug. Second time. She packed a bag while he was out. He came back before she got to the car. She was in the hospital for 4 days. Colton's voice didn't waver. He said it like someone reading a fact from a textbook, because that was the only way you could say something like that without falling apart in front of a stranger. She told us she'd slipped in the kitchen. And the third time the boy was quiet. Colton, the third time was last year. She got all the way to her sister's house in Henderson. He turned back from the window. Merrick has people. They showed up at her sister's house. They didn't touch anyone. They just stood outside for 2 days. Her sister has kids, 2 little girls. He paused. Mom came back. Jack set down his coffee mug. He breathed slowly through his nose. The diner was quiet around them. Betty was washing something behind the counter. The rain was the loudest thing in the room. Jack had been in rooms with violent men his whole adult life. He had been one. He still was when the situation required it. He had told himself in those years that the things he did were between adults who had chosen their world. That was the line he drew. You chose the life, you lived in it, you took what came. But this, a woman trapped behind a wall built from police corruption and fear, and a man willing to threaten children at their relative's house. A boy who walked 30 miles through a desert storm in taped together shoes to get his little sister to safety. Jack thought about a night from 1953. He was 9 years old. His father had come home drunk and his mother had burned dinner. And what followed was not something he let himself think about in detail anymore. But he thought about himself at 9, sitting in the dark of a closet with his arm around his little brother Tommy, whispering to Tommy that it was going to be okay, that Dad would be done soon, that they just had to wait. He thought about Tommy. He thought about what he hadn't done for Tommy later when they were older, when he had been big enough and strong enough to do something. But he had been so deep in his own rage and his own choices that he hadn't seen it happening until it was too late. Tommy had been gone for 27 years. Jack looked at Colton. He looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep against her brother's shoulder with her hand still curled in his sleeve. He looked at the boy across from him, this exhausted, hungry, fiercely controlled 11-year-old who had walked 30 miles through a desert storm carrying his baby sister and his mother's instructions in a terror so old and deep that he had learned to wear it like a second skin. Jack Thorne, who had faced down armed men without blinking, felt something he hadn't felt in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Shame. Not of who he was. He had made a kind of peace with who he was. But shame of the fact that the world had produced this moment again, had produced another version of that closet, another terrified child in the dark. And the boy sitting across from him had no one. No one but a man who everyone in 3 counties agreed was the worst possible choice. Jack picked up Betty's dessert menu from behind the napkin holder. He didn't look at it. Your mom, he said, is she at the house right now? Colton looked up, a new alertness in his face. Careful, why? Because if she's at the house, she's not safe. And if Merrick knows you two are gone, he doesn't know yet. Colton said it quickly, like he had been waiting to say it. He was out when we left. He doesn't usually get back until real late on Fridays. Mom said we'd have until at least midnight before he stopped. His eyes went to the window, to the dark, to the storm. And something shifted in his expression so fast Jack almost missed it. Fear breaking through the controlled surface for just a moment. What time is it? Jack checked his watch. 9:43. Colton's breath went shallow. She said he'd be back by midnight, the boy said, and his voice had changed now. Thinner, younger, the control cracking. She said she'd have time. She said she was going to go to her friend Donna's house and then figure out how to get to Millerton. She said he pulled out a scrap of paper from his jacket pocket, crumpled and damp, a phone number written in pencil. She was supposed to leave after we did. She was supposed to already be gone by now. She should be at Donna's. He looked up at Jack. I have Donna's number. I've been trying to figure out how to call. I don't have any quarters. I've been trying to figure out how to... Jack reached into his vest pocket, set 3 quarters on the table. Colton looked at them, then at Jack. Betty's got a phone behind the counter, Jack said. Colton slid out of the booth so fast he nearly woke Lily. Betty looked up as he came toward the counter, and Jack gave her a look that said, let him use it. And Betty nodded without a word and handed the receiver over the counter. Jack sat in the booth. Lily slept against the wall where her brother had been. Jack watched the boy dial the number, watched him wait, watched his face. He knew before Colton said a word. The call went through, someone answered, and Colton's face, that carefully held, relentlessly composed face, fell completely apart for just a second before he grabbed it back. Donna, he said, it's Colton, Sarah's son. Is she... He stopped, listened. She left an hour ago. She was coming to you. Did she? His voice dropped to almost nothing. She didn't come. You're sure Jack was already standing? He was out of the booth before Colton finished the call. He stopped at the counter and pulled 2 20s from his wallet and put them down in front of Betty without explaining. Those kids sleep here tonight, he said. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone you don't know. Betty looked at the money, then at him. Jack Donna's number. He held out his hand. Colton gave it to him, not even asking why. Because there are moments when a child simply recognizes who the adult in the room is and stops arguing. Jack memorized the number and handed it back. I'll call from the road. What are you going to do? Colton said. Jack picked up his jacket from the booth. Is there anyone else who knows where your mother was staying? Anything she said about Merrick's schedule, where he keeps his stuff, who he runs with? There's a man named Silas, works for Vincent. She said Silas was the only one who ever looked like he might actually feel bad about things. She called him soft. Colton swallowed. He has a daughter. Mom said once that he only does what he does because Vincent has something on him. Jack filed that away. He looked down at the boy. You did the right thing, Jack said. Getting Lily out. That was the right call. I left my mom there. Your mom told you to go. You respected what she told you. He put on his jacket. Now I'm going to go finish what she started. You stay here with your sister. Don't open that door. You don't even know where we live, Colton said. Jack looked at him. 30 miles east, Jack said. What road? Colton told him. Jack walked out into the storm. The rain was apocalyptic. Jack got on his Harley, and it felt like riding into a wall of water. He didn't care. He had the address in his head and the route mapped, and his hands were steady on the handlebars. And that cold thing that had woken up in his chest while he sat across from that boy had fully come alive now and sharpened itself into something he recognized. He pulled out his phone at the first light, called Marcus, his sergeant-at-arms. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Boss, I need you to pull Garrett and Rhett and meet me at the Desert Crossroads on 31 South in 20 minutes. A pause. Tonight in this 20 minutes, Marcus. Another pause. Marcus knew Jack's voice. In the way that a man who had ridden with someone for 11 years knows when a thing is serious and when it is beyond serious. 20 minutes, Marcus said. Jack hung up and rode into the storm. He thought about Tommy. He thought about the closet. He thought about that second plate of food sitting in the diner booth every Friday night for 6 years. And he thought about a woman named Sarah who had sent her children into a desert storm because she loved them enough to let them go, and then had tried to follow them into safety and hadn't arrived. Somewhere between Millerton and Betty's diner, something had gone wrong. Jack intended to find out what. The rain hadn't let up by the time Jack hit the Desert Crossroads. He pulled off the highway and sat on his idling Harley and watched the headlights cut through the dark. Marcus arrived first, then Garrett 40 seconds behind him, then Rhett coming in hot from the south with water spraying off both tires. 3 men. Good men in the way that men like them could be good. Loyal, hard, and capable of things that didn't get discussed in polite company. Marcus pulled up beside him and killed his engine. He was a compact, scarred man of 51 with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left ear to his chin. He had been with Jack since the early days. He read the situation on Jack's face and said nothing, which was the correct response. Vincent Merrick, Jack said. Rhett cursed under his breath. Garrett just stared. I know, Jack said. Listen to me. A woman named Sarah, last name Ashford, was supposed to leave his house tonight and get to her friend's place. She didn't arrive. Her 2 kids are at Betty's diner waiting on her. The boy says Merrick won't be back until midnight. He checked his watch. 10:19, which means we have maybe 40 minutes before he comes home and finds out she's gone. If she's still in that house, we need her out before that happens. Marcus said, Jack. Merrick's got Carson and 2 other deputies on his payroll. You know that. I know that. If we roll up on his property and anything goes sideways, I know what it means, Marcus. Do you? Because this isn't our fight. This isn't club business. This is a domestic situation involving a man who has 3 law enforcement officers covering his back. And if we 2 kids walk 30 miles through that storm tonight, Jack said, the boy's 11, the girl is 7. They've been living under that man's roof for 3 years. He turned and looked at Marcus. The girl flinches when someone raises their voice. Marcus went quiet. I'm going with or without you, Jack said. All 3 of you can go home. I mean that. This isn't a club order. You don't owe me this one. Nobody moved. Nobody started their engines. Garrett said, what's the address? The house was a quarter mile off the county road, down a dirt track that the rain had turned into a mud river. Jack killed his headlight 200 yards out and went the rest of the way by feel. The others followed. He heard it before he saw it. Not what he expected. He had expected silence. The particular silence of an empty house in a storm. What he heard instead was a voice, a man's voice, low and controlled in the way that is worse than shouting. Jack stopped. Merrick was already back. He was 40 minutes early. Jack turned to Marcus and held up one finger. Wait. He went forward alone. The front door was not fully closed. It had been left open, maybe 4 inches. Jack stopped just outside and listened. I told you this was going to happen, a man was saying. I told you the first time and the second time, and now here we are, Sarah. Here we are again. Where did you think you were going to go? A woman's voice, low, trembling, but trying not to be. I just went to the store, Vincent. I told you that. The store. A pause. In a storm. At 9 o'clock. With a bag packed. I saw the bag, Sarah. Silence. Where are the kids? Jack pushed the door open and walked in. Merrick was not what Jack had pictured. He was average height, average build, early 40s with a forgettable face. He didn't look like a monster. That was the thing about men like him. They almost never did. Sarah was against the far wall. She was a small woman with dark hair and a split lip that was fresh. She was wearing a jacket, which meant she had been trying to leave. The bag Merrick had mentioned was on the floor near the door. Open, clothes spilling out of it. Merrick turned. He looked at Jack. He looked at the patch on Jack's vest. He looked at the open door in the shapes of Marcus and Garrett and Rhett standing in the dark behind it. For exactly 3 seconds, he did the calculation. Then he said very calmly, "You're trespassing." "That's probably true," Jack said. "You need to get off my property. I need the woman and her bag and whatever paperwork she's got in this house. She's got about 4 minutes to get it together, and then we're leaving." Merrick's face rearranged itself into something almost pleasant. It was chilling the way he did it. "You have no idea what you're walking into," he said. "You're Jack Thorne. I know who you are. I know your operation. And I am telling you, man to man, this is not something you want to be involved in. This is a private family matter, and you have just broken about 6 laws coming in here. And I have very good friends in the sheriff's department who Carson Jack said. Merrick paused. Carson and Deputy Reyes. And if I had to guess, I'd say the third one is either Cho or Polson. And I'd lean toward Polson because he's been living about $40,000 a year above his salary for the last 3 years. Jack watched Merrick's face. You want to call them, call them. But while we're waiting for them to drive out here in this storm, Sarah is going to be packing that bag. Sarah isn't going anywhere. Sarah Jack said her name without looking away from Merrick. Start with the documents. Anything official. You know where they are. A small sound then. Yes, go get them. Merrick moved. Jack moved faster. He had 6 inches and 60 pounds on Merrick, and he used both. He didn't hit him. That would have been clean. Instead, he put himself between Merrick and the direction Sarah had gone, and he stood there. And he looked down at Merrick from 6'4" of absolute certainty, and he said, don't. Merrick looked up at him. The pleasant mask had slipped now. You think you're the first man who's tried to be the hero in this story, Merrick said. You think you're the first one she's called? Her sister tried. Her sister's husband tried. You know what happened to them? He said it without raising his voice. I don't need to touch you. I've got people who handle this kind of situation. You ride away tonight, maybe nothing happens. But if you take her out of this house, then in what Jack said. Merrick smiled. It was the kind of smile that had nothing warm in it whatsoever. Then you'll find out. He said. Sarah came back with a manila envelope clutched to her chest and her eyes moving between Jack and Merrick. She had more bruises than the one on her lip. Jack could see the shape of an old one along her collarbone. And the way she held her right arm slightly away from her body told him that shoulder had been hurt recently. 3 years, Colton had said. 3 years of this. I have everything, she said. Her voice was steadier than Jack expected. Good, Jack said. He picked up her bag from the floor. Let's go. She's not. Merrick started. She is, Jack said. And I want you to listen to me very carefully right now because I'm only going to say this once. He turned to fully face Merrick. You're going to stand there and you're going to watch her walk out that door. And then you're going to sit down and think very hard about the next move you make because the next move matters. He took one step closer. I've been a lot of things in my life, Mr. Merrick. Most of them not good. But I have never not once hurt a woman or a child. And I have never not once walked away from a man who did. He let that sit. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Merrick's jaw worked. His eyes went to the door, to Marcus's silhouette in the frame. And back. You just made a very serious mistake, he said. Probably, Jack said. I've made a lot of them. This one I can live with. He turned to Sarah. Walk. She walked. Marcus had a truck, an old F-250. Garrett drove it. Sarah was in the cab with the heater running and the manila envelope on her lap, and both hands pressed flat against her thighs like she was holding herself together by will alone. Jack rode alongside. The rain was thinning at last. His phone rang at 10:51. He didn't recognize the number. He answered. Mr. Thorne, a man's voice. Cautious. You don't know me. My name is Silas Brennan. I work for Vincent Merrick. Jack said nothing. I know what happened tonight, Silas said. I know you took Sarah out. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because of a pause. Because I have been wanting someone to do exactly what you did for about 8 months. And I didn't have the guts to do it myself. Jack pulled slightly ahead of the truck. What do you want, Silas? Vincent's already made 2 phone calls. One to Carson, one to a man named Carter. Carter is not law enforcement. He handles things Vincent doesn't want associated with his name. Where are they going, I don't know yet. But Vincent knows Sarah has kids. He knows they weren't at the neighbors. He's going to figure out that you have all 3 of them somewhere. And when he does, Silas stopped. Mr. Thorne, I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. I've done things for this man that I can't undo. But I am not going to be the person who lets him put his hands on children to get back at someone who did the right thing. Then help me. I'm trying. Another pause. I have a USB drive. There's financial records on it, payment logs, phone records, names of every deputy on his payroll and the amounts and the dates. There's enough on that drive to put Vincent away and take down half the county sheriff's department with him. Jack let that land. Why haven't you used it before now? Because I didn't know who to trust with it, and because I was afraid. His voice broke slightly on the last word. I'm still afraid, but I'm more afraid of what I'm becoming. Where are you right now, Merrick's property? I'm leaving now. I have the drive with me. Meet me at Betty's Desert Stop Diner. 20 minutes. A pause. Will it be safe? Jack thought about Betty's locked door and two children sleeping inside. I'll make sure it is, he said. Betty opened the back door when Jack knocked 3 times. Their signal. She had the lights low and the closed sign in the window. Colton was awake at the corner booth, sitting exactly where Jack had left him, with Lily curled up against him, still sleeping. He had Betty's coffee mug in front of him, half full, gone cold, and he had been staring at the door. When Sarah walked through it, Colton made a sound that Jack wasn't sure he had ever heard from a human being before. It wasn't a word. It was the sound of something snapping back into place after being bent so long it should have broken. He was out of the booth before his mother had taken 2 steps. Betty turned away and pretended to wash something that didn't need washing. Jack moved to the counter and looked at the wall and gave them the 30 seconds that were not his to witness. He heard Colton say "Mom" in a voice that was nothing like the controlled, careful voice he had used all night. He heard Sarah say something low and fierce and full of a love that had no translation in any language. Lily woke up when her mother touched her face, and the sound she made, a single mama in a voice still blurred with sleep, went through Jack like a blade. He turned around and looked at them, and something was different in his chest now. Not the cold thing from before. Something else, warmer, older. He thought of Rachel, his daughter, 29 now, somewhere in Portland, living a life he knew nothing about because he had burned his way out of it before she'd had the chance to truly know him. He thought about the last time he had seen her. She had been 14, standing in a driveway, watching him ride away. He had told himself she was better off. Standing in Betty's diner, watching a mother hold her children for the first time in hours, Jack Thorne understood, not abstractly, but in the particular physical way that real understanding lives in your sternum, that he had been wrong. That there was no version of better off that had an 11-year-old boy walking 30 miles through a desert storm. That there was no version of better off that meant growing up without a father. He didn't say any of this. He wasn't built for saying things like that. He just stood at the counter and waited. Silas Brennan arrived 17 minutes later. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-40s, with the look of someone who had been promising himself he was going to do the right thing for a long time and had finally run out of road to kick the can down. He stood just inside the door and looked at Sarah and her children, and something in his face collapsed quietly. "I'm sorry," he said, not to Jack. To her, "I'm so sorry. I knew what he was doing for 3 years and I—" "Don't," Sarah said, not unkindly. "Just final. Just fix it." Silas put the USB drive on the counter. Jack picked it up. He turned it over in his fingers. Small, thumb-sized. "Who do we give this to?" Jack asked. "Not local law," Silas said. "Carson has people in the county DA's office, too. It needs to go state or federal. There's a detective, state CID, name is Kane Whitmore. I've had his number for 6 months." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, slightly bent, worn at the edges. "I never called. I couldn't make myself." He set the card on the counter next to Jack's hand. "I'm ready to testify to everything. My name, my account, dates, amounts, all of it. I'll lose everything, my job, my house, whatever protection being close to Vincent gave me." His voice didn't shake. "But my daughter is 8 years old, and when she's old enough to ask me what kind of man I was, I need to have an answer." Colton was watching Silas from the booth. The boy had his arm around his mother, and he was listening with that old-eyed attention Jack had noticed earlier. When Silas finished speaking, Colton looked at Jack. "Is it enough?" Colton asked. "That drive, is it enough to actually stop him?" Jack looked at Silas. Silas said, "If Whitmore is who the public defender said he is, yes. Yes, it should be enough." "Should be," Colton said. Jack called the number on Kane Whitmore's card at 11:38. He expected voicemail. He got a human being on the second ring. "Whitmore. My name is Jack Thorne. I'm going to assume that name means something to you even if we've never spoken." A pause. "I know who you are, Mr. Thorne." "Then you know I'm not someone who calls state CID for fun. I have a USB drive with financial records, payment logs, and communication records documenting 3 years of payments from a man named Vincent Merrick to 3 deputies in the county sheriff's office and at least one individual in the county DA's office. I also have a witness who was inside Merrick's operation and is willing to testify. And I have a woman and 2 children who are not safe until Merrick is in custody." Another pause, longer. "Where are you right now?" Whitmore said. Jack told him, "Don't move. Don't let anyone leave. I'm 4 hours out, but I'll have an agent I trust there in 90 minutes. He paused. "Mr. Thorne, is everyone safe?" Jack looked at the booth where Sarah was sitting with her children. Colton had his head against his mother's shoulder, and his eyes were finally closing. Lily was already deeply asleep again. Betty had put a plate of pie in front of all of them and covered the sleeping kids with a coat from the back. Silas sat across from them, his hands around a coffee cup, looking like a man who had set down something very heavy after carrying it for a very long time. "For right now," Jack said. "That'll have to be enough," Whitmore said. 90 minutes. Jack hung up. His phone lit up. Unknown number. He picked it up. No one spoke for a moment. Then a voice he recognized. Smooth. Unhurried. "I want you to know something," Vincent Merrick said. "I don't lose." Jack said nothing. "Whatever you think you've done tonight, it's not done. It's not even close to done. I have people, Mr. Thorne. I have people in places you haven't thought about yet. And Sarah and those kids, they can run wherever they want. They can hide behind whoever they want." A pause. "I will find them. And when I do, I want you to remember that you could have walked away." Jack looked at Betty's back, at the booth, at Colton's sleeping face. "I've been a lot of things," Jack said quietly, "but I've never been the kind of man who could walk away from that booth and live with myself." Merrick hung up. Jack set the phone down. He had 90 minutes. Agent Brooks Calloway arrived 78 minutes later. He was a compact man in his mid-40s with a state CID badge and the flat professional manner of someone who had seen enough that very little surprised him anymore. He came through the front door alone, hands visible. He sat at the counter. He looked around the diner. He looked at Sarah and the children in the booth, at Silas, at Betty, at Marcus and Garrett and Rhett, who had taken up positions by the windows. He took it all in without comment. "Detective Whitmore sends his regards," Brooks said. He reached into his jacket and produced a padded evidence envelope. "USB drive goes in here. Chain of custody starts now." He looked at Silas. "You're the witness." "Yes," Silas said. "Are you prepared to give a formal statement tonight?" A brief pause. Then Silas reached into his jacket and put the drive on the counter. "I've been prepared for 8 months," he said. "I just needed to get out of my own way." Brooks took the drive. He sealed the envelope. He looked at Jack. "Mr. Thorne, I want to ask you something directly." "Go ahead. You drove onto Vincent Merrick's property tonight without a warrant, without authorization, and removed a person from a private residence." Jack looked at him. "I did." "The woman came voluntarily." "You can ask her." Brooks turned to Sarah. She met his eyes without flinching. "He asked me if I wanted to leave," she said. "I said yes. I walked out on my own." Brooks nodded once. The night stretched. Brooks took statements. Whitmore arrived by 2 in the morning. Rumpled jacket, coffee cup. The energy of someone running on the fuel of the case finally cracking open. He shook Jack's hand and said nothing performative about it. By 3:15, Silas had given a recorded statement that lasted 90 minutes. Names, dates, amounts, the mechanics of a corruption network that had been running for 11 years inside the county sheriff's office. He named Carson. He named Reyes. He named the individual in the DA's office. He gave timestamps, account numbers, a private email chain he had saved to a second drive he produced from his wallet. Brooks looked at that second drive. "You've had this the whole time," he said. "Yes," Silas said. "Why 2 drives?" "Because one is the evidence," Silas said, "and one is insurance in case someone took the first one and buried it." Whitmore put both drives in separate sealed envelopes and locked them in his car personally. At 4 in the morning, Jack got a phone call. It was Detective Carla Reyes from the State Attorney General's office. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "my name is Detective Carla Reyes. You spoke with Agent Calloway tonight. I've been briefed. I need you to understand something." A pause. "Vincent Merrick made a call at 11:42 tonight to an attorney named Patterson in Las Vegas. Patterson is very good and very expensive, and he is on his way to the county seat right now. Merrick is going to attempt to file a complaint against you personally. Kidnapping, trespassing, coercion, before we can move on our end." Jack sat very still. "How long does he have county office opens at 8? "Patterson will be there at 8:01. "We have roughly 4 hours to put a warrant in front of a judge who is not on Merrick's payroll. However, with 2 drives of evidence and a cooperative witness, it is possible." Another pause. "What I need from you is a formal statement tonight before Patterson files anything. Where do I go?" She gave him an address. "Mr. Thorne," she said just before he hung up, "the fact that you're doing this, I want you to know it matters." Jack didn't know what to say to that. He said something non-committal and ended the call. He gave a statement in a windowless room that smelled like old coffee and fluorescent lighting. And he said everything true and left nothing out. And when Detective Reyes slid the typed summary across the table for him to sign at 5:47 in the morning, his hand was steadier than it had any right to be. "Judge Calloway signed the warrant 20 minutes ago," she said. "Merrick will be taken into custody before Patterson gets anywhere near a county office." Jack felt something loosen in his chest. "And the senator," he said. Reyes looked at him. "That's a federal matter, and it's moving. That's all I can tell you right now." He understood. But it was Whitmore who called at 6:23, and the quality of the detective's voice when he answered told Jack everything before the words did. "Merrick wasn't at the property when we arrived," Whitmore said. "He left sometime in the night." Jack pulled off the road. "He's gone," Whitmore said. "And we believe, based on a call log we pulled, that someone tipped him. Someone who knew about the warrant before we executed it." Jack sat on his idling Harley on the shoulder of a Nevada state highway. "You said the senator's people are involved," Jack said. "Yes." "Then Merrick didn't just get a tip about a warrant. He got a tip that the whole structure around him is collapsing, which means he's not running." A pause. "Mr. Thorne, a man like Merrick doesn't run," Jack said. "He doesn't have the psychology for it. He told me last night he doesn't lose. Running is losing." Jack turned his Harley around and, "He's going to do what he always does when he feels cornered. He's going to go after the thing he thinks belongs to him." Sarah and the children were moved to a state-run transition facility 40 minutes north. Cleaner, more official, actual security, a social worker on staff. Jack stood in the parking lot and watched the building, the warm yellow light in the windows. Garrett called at 9:06. "Boss, St. Catherine's Hospital. Something's happening." Jack felt the cold thing in his chest shift. "Sarah," he said immediately. "No, she's with Brooks. She's safe," but Merrick Garrett stopped. "Boss, someone called a tip into the hospital. An anonymous tip that a woman matching Sarah's description was admitted to the emergency room at 6 this morning." Jack understood. "It's a setup," Garrett said. "Merrick called in the tip himself. Or Garrett said he's using the hospital as a drawing point." "Jack, If Merrick thinks Sarah is there, Jack was already moving toward his Harley. If Merrick thinks Sarah is at that hospital, Jack said, then Merrick is at that hospital. He rode hard. He heard the chaos before he reached the entrance. Not gunfire. Merrick was too careful for that. But voices, running feet, a security guard on his radio. Jack went through the main door and the scene assembled itself. Two of Merrick's people blocking the corridor to the left. Hospital security was there but outmatched. At the end of the corridor, Merrick. He had a woman's arm. But that was wrong. Sarah was with Brooks. Jack knew that, not Sarah. A woman who had been admitted that morning. Dark-haired, similar build. A woman Merrick had grabbed because, from 30 feet away in his state of mind, she looked close enough. And Merrick's face when Jack saw it was the face of a man who already knew that he had made an error and was processing what that meant for his next move. Calculated violence is predictable. Panicked violence is not. Jack walked forward. Merrick saw him at the same moment. The two men moved to intercept. Jack stopped. "Let her go," Jack said. Merrick looked at him. "Where is she?" Merrick said. "Somewhere you won't find her." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." Around them, the quarter had cleared. The nurses had moved patients behind doors. The security guards were on their radios, which meant real law enforcement was coming. "Let that woman go. She's not who you're looking for." Merrick looked at the woman he was holding, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. His jaw worked. He released her arm, not gently, just abruptly, and she stumbled sideways and a nurse came from nowhere to pull her back through a doorway. The two men in the corridor stepped toward Jack. Jack didn't move. "Call them off," Jack said to Merrick. "Why would I do that?" "Because this is over, Vincent. The warrant was signed by a judge who isn't in your pocket. The evidence is in federal hands. And Silas has given a 6-hour recorded statement. The state senator you've been hiding behind is being looked at by the FBI as of this morning." Jack watched Merrick's face. "You're not covered anymore. And every minute you stand in this hallway is another charge." Merrick was breathing harder. "You took everything from me," Merrick said quietly. And that was what made it land differently. This was something personal and raw. "You came into my house, and you took my family, and you turned my own people against me. And you think you can stand there and tell me to be smart? She was never yours," Jack said. "Neither were those kids." Merrick moved, not toward Jack. That was the thing that Jack hadn't anticipated. He had anticipated Merrick coming at him. And when Merrick turned and went the other way down the corridor toward the emergency stairwell, Jack was a half-second behind. The two men hit him from both sides. What followed was not clean. Jack was bigger than both of them, but he was 54 and tired. He put the first one on the floor with something that cost him more than it should have. The second one got hold of his jacket, and they went into the wall together, and something cracked in Jack's side that was either a rib or felt exactly like one bomb. He got free. He went down the corridor. He pushed through the stairwell door, and he stopped because Colton was there. Colton, who was supposed to be in Brooks's car, heading north, standing on the stairwell, landing with both feet planted and both hands raised. And in Colton's hands, a weapon, a deputy sidearm, the security guards, the one who had been backing away, and hadn't noticed the boy behind him in the chaos. Colton's hands were shaking, both of them. Merrick was 3 steps below him on the stairwell landing, facing up, frozen. Because there are things that stop even men like Merrick. A child with a gun, with his little sister's face in his eyes, in his mother's split lip, and 3 years of evidence in his body. "That is one of those things," Colton Jack said. The boy didn't look at him. His eyes were on Merrick. His jaw was locked. "Colton, look at me, nothing, son. Look at me." The word "son" stopped it. Colton's eyes moved just fractionally, just enough, to Jack. And Jack saw everything in them. Everything the boy had been carrying since before he could have named what it was. Every night in a house where someone he loved was afraid. Every bruise he had watched happen and been too small to stop. 30 miles of desert in a storm with his sister's hand in his. walking towards something better because there was nothing left to lose. All of it right there in the eyes of an 11-year-old, pointing a gun at the man who had done it. Jack didn't move toward him. He didn't reach for the weapon. He just stood there, bleeding from where the wall had found his face. One arm held slightly away from his side because of the rib, and he looked at the boy. And he said the only true thing he had. If you pull that trigger, Jack said, he steals your life too. Colton's hands shook. He already stole everything else Colton said. His voice was barely above a whisper. He stole 3 years. He took her from us a little at a time. I watched it happen and I couldn't do anything. I was too small. I was always too. He stopped. His throat worked. I'm not small anymore. No, Jack said, you're not. You are the bravest person I've met in 54 years of living. What you did last night, getting Lily out, walking 30 miles, trusting a stranger, that is not something most grown men could have done. His voice was steady. I need you to hear me. What you're holding right now, that's not strength. That's him winning. That is the last thing he takes from you if you let it happen. Your future, your whole life, everything you walk into from here. Jack took one slow breath, put it down, and let the law take him. Real law this time. People who aren't in his pocket, people who have 6 hours of testimony and 2 drives of evidence. In a federal investigation that started this morning. He paused. Let him lose the right way, the way he can't come back from. The stairwell was completely silent. Colton's hands were still shaking. And then slowly, in the way that things that have been held at terrible tension for too long finally released, his arms came down. The gun hit the landing step with a sound that echoed up through the stairwell. Colton's legs gave out from under him, and he sat down hard on the step and put his face in both hands and made a sound that had been building in him for 3 years and had nowhere left to go. Jack crossed the landing in 3 steps and got between Colton and Merrick. He looked down at Merrick on the steps below. Get up, Jack said, and behind them through the stairwell door came the sound of feet. Real feet. Official feet. Brooks came through the door first. He took in the scene. You good, he said. I've been better, Jack said. Brooks moved past him and down the stairs toward Merrick, and Jack stood on that landing and put his hand carefully on the back of Colton's head. Not the way Betty had done it, which had made the boy flinch, but slowly, so the boy could feel it coming. And Colton didn't flinch this time. He just sat there and breathed. And for the first time since Jack had watched him walk into Betty's diner, soaking wet and starving, he let himself be a child. Jack stood over him and kept his hand there and said nothing. And outside the stairwell door, he heard handcuffs and Miranda rights and the sound of a man being taken into custody for the last time. Brooks drove Colton back to his mother himself. Jack followed in an estate vehicle because his Harley was still at the hospital and his rib made every breath a small argument. When they arrived at the transition facility, Sarah was waiting in the lobby. She had been told on the phone. She knew what had happened in the stairwell, and yet when Colton came through the door, she didn't say a single word about any of it. She just opened her arms, and he walked into them. Lily came running from somewhere down the hall and hit them both at knee level. Jack stood in the lobby doorway with his hand pressed to his side and watched that. Brooks appeared beside him. Hospital wants you evaluated. That rib. Later, Jack, I said later. Brooks looked at him. Merrick's in county custody pending federal transfer. The senator's office issued a statement an hour ago. His lawyer is trying to get ahead of it. Brooks paused. It's not going to work. The federal case is too far along and Silas's testimony is too specific. This doesn't get buried, Jack nodded. It's going to take time, Brooks said. The trial, the sentencing, but the outcome, he paused. The outcome is not in doubt. Jack looked at Sarah and her children in the lobby. Tell her that Jack said. Make sure she hears it from someone with a badge. Brooks went. Sarah found him 20 minutes later. standing outside in the cold morning air. She came out and stood beside him. "Brooks told me," she said, "about the case, about the senator." "Good. He said it could be 18 months before the trial." She was quiet. "That's a long time to hold your breath." "You've been holding it for 3 years," Jack said. 18 months is nothing." She almost smiled. "Brooks also told me what happened in the stairwell, what you said to Colton." Jack didn't respond. "I keep thinking about it. My son, my 11-year-old. Her voice didn't break, but it came close. I keep thinking, what if you hadn't been there? What if you hadn't known what to say? He would have put it down on his own," Jack said. "Maybe." She turned to look at him. "But you said the right thing at the exact right moment." "How did you know what to say?" Jack looked at the flat Nevada horizon. "Because someone should have said it to me," once he said, "a long time ago." And they didn't. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "What happened to you?" she said. "Same thing that happened to you," Jack said. "Different house. Long time ago." He paused. "I didn't get out the way you did. I got out a different way. The kind that cost everyone around me for 20 years. She nodded. "Is there anyone," she said, "anyone you left behind who might still be there to go back to?" Jack thought about Rachel. "My daughter," he said. "Portland. Have you talked to her?" "Not in 15 years. Are you afraid to?" "Yes," he said, which was the most honest single word he had said in recent memory. "She might surprise you," Sarah said. "Or she might not." "That's true," Sarah said. "But you spent last night doing something very hard because the alternative was something you couldn't live with." She looked at him steadily. "I think you've been living with the alternative of not calling your daughter for 15 years. And I think you already know you can't keep doing it." Jack said nothing. Sarah put her hand briefly on his arm. And then she went back inside. The next 4 months moved the way consequential things move when the machinery of justice is finally working. Merrick was denied bail at his federal arraignment. Whitmore reported to Jack in a brief phone call. The senator resigned in November. His resignation statement was a kind of careful lawyer-drafted document that said nothing while confirming everything. Deputy Carson and 2 others from the county sheriff's office were suspended. The county DA's office underwent an independent review. Each of these things reached Jack the way most things reached him. Through the radio in the garage, through Betty mentioning something she had heard. Jack heard about it. He nodded. He went back to whatever he was doing. The garage had always done reasonably well. Jack was a genuinely good mechanic. But in the months after October, something shifted. He hired 2 more people. He expanded the bay. He started putting money into a fund that Margaret Harrington administered, a resource for women and children fleeing domestic situations. Jack's first contribution was substantial enough that Margaret called him. "Jack, this is too much." "Put it to work," he said. The second contribution came 3 months later. Larger. He called Betty and proposed something that had been sitting in the back of his mind. A weekly dinner. Free. No questions. Whatever was going on in your life, you sat down and you ate like a human being. Betty looked at him when he said it. "Like someone told you once," she said. "Something like that." "I'll need help with the cost," she said. "I know. I'll cover the cost." He paused. "You cover the pie." Betty smiled. "Deal." He drove to the transition facility for the last time in December. Sarah had found a job, office administration, an hour's drive each way. Colton was in school, real school, with friends, with a teacher who had taken an interest in him, with a library card and a backpack that didn't have tape on it. Lily was in 2nd grade and had, according to Sarah, recently informed her class during show and tell that her favorite person was a very big man who was scary but wasn't actually scary. The teacher had sent a note home. Sarah had photographed it and texted it to Jack. Jack read it twice and put his phone in his pocket and went back to the engine he was working on. Colton found him at the garage in early January, not with his mother, alone, on a bicycle. He leaned the bike against the outside wall and walked in and stood in the bay looking at Jack working, and waited until Jack looked up. "Hey," Colton said. "Hey," Jack said. "I wanted to say something." Jack set down his tool. He turned around and gave the boy his full attention. "You didn't have to do any of it," Colton said. "Last October. You didn't know us. You didn't owe us anything. You could have given us the leftovers and let us go and nobody would have blamed you." He paused. "Why didn't you?" Jack thought about how to answer that. "You reminded me of someone," Jack said. Colton waited. "My brother," Jack said. "His name was Tommy. He was 4 years younger than me. We grew up in a house where things happen that shouldn't happen to kids." He stopped, started again. "I was supposed to protect him. I told myself I was, but I got old enough to leave and I left. And I told myself he'd be okay." Jack looked at the boy. He didn't. He never made it out. Colton was very still. "What happened to him?" he said. "He died when he was 23, Jack said. "The things that happened to him when he was young. He was never able to get past them. He made choices that were his own choices. I'm not saying they weren't, but—" He paused. "I was supposed to protect him, and I chose myself instead. And I've been carrying that for 27 years. The garage was very quiet. "That's not your fault," Colton said. "Some of it is," Jack said. "I've had a long time to figure out exactly how much. Some of it is and some of it isn't. And the part that is, I can't give that back to him. But I was sitting in Betty's diner that night, looking at you and your sister, and I realized I had a choice, and I wasn't going to choose myself again." Colton looked at him for a long time. "Tommy would have liked you," Jack said. "You've got the same kind of stubborn in you he had." Colton almost smiled. "I'm going to be okay," Colton said. It didn't sound like reassurance. It sounded like a decision. "I know," Jack said, "and I'm not going to what happened in the hospital. I'm not—" He stopped. "I thought about it a lot. What would have happened if I—" He couldn't finish that sentence. "I just want you to know that I heard what you said. I heard all of it, and I'm not going to waste it." Jack nodded. "Good," he said. Colton went. The twist Jack hadn't seen coming arrived on a Tuesday in February. A letter, handwritten, on plain paper, postmarked Portland, Oregon. He found it in the stack of garage invoices and recognized the handwriting on the envelope. He sat down on the workbench. He looked at it for a long time without opening it. His hands, which had been steady in a Nevada stairwell, with blood on his face and a gun in a child's hands, were not completely steady now. He opened it. It was not long, 3 paragraphs. She wrote that she had heard about October. She wrote that she had spent 3 months deciding whether to write this. She wrote that she wasn't ready to say everything. She wasn't ready to undo 15 years in one letter. But she wrote one sentence near the end that Jack read 3 times in a row. "Maybe you weren't the man I thought you were." Jack folded the letter back up. He put it in his jacket pocket. He sat on the workbench for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called a number he had had for 15 years and never used. It rang 4 times. His whole chest was locked. On the 5th ring, voice female. Careful. "Hello, Rachel," he said. His voice came out steady. "It's your father." A silence. Not hostile, not warm. Just the silence of a person absorbing something they have been both dreading and waiting for. "I know," she said finally. "I got your letter. I know. I'm not going to try to explain 15 years on a phone call," Jack said. "I'm not that stupid," he paused. "But I wanted to call. I should have called a long time ago. I know that." Another silence. Longer. He heard her breathing. "I'm not ready to—" She started. "I'm not asking you to be ready for anything," Jack said. "I just—" He stopped, found the words that were actually true. "I just needed you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm still here. If there's ever a time when you want to, I'm not going anywhere." Rachel was quiet for a long time. "Okay," she said finally. That one word, carrying everything. "Okay," Jack said. They talked for 11 more minutes, nothing heavy. She asked about the garage. He asked about Portland. It was the conversation of two strangers who share the same blood, careful and a little awkward and not nothing. When she hung up, Jack sat in his garage and breathed slowly and felt something he hadn't felt in so long that he almost didn't know how to hold it. Hope. On the last Friday of February, Jack Thorne walked into Betty's Desert Stop at 8 o'clock sharp. He sat in his corner booth. He ordered his meal. Betty brought it out and then went back to the counter. And he sat in the same seat he had sat in every Friday for 6 years and looked at the empty bench across from him. For 6 years, the second plate had been for Tommy. Every Friday, an untouched plate, a meal for a ghost, a penance and a ritual, and a way of staying connected to the guilt he had decided he deserved to carry. He looked at it for a long time. Then he thought about Colton saying, "I'm going to be okay," and meaning it as a decision. He thought about Sarah's hand on his arm in the cold morning air. He thought about Rachel saying "okay" in a voice that was not yet yes, but was not no anymore either. He thought about a 7-year-old girl who had told her class that her favorite person was very big and scary, but wasn't actually scary. He thought about Tommy. He thought about what Tommy would say. The real Tommy, the 4-year-old Tommy who had grabbed his big brother's hand in the dark of a closet and trusted him completely. Jack picked up his fork. He ate his meal. He sat in the booth after he finished, with the second plate still untouched across from him, and he looked at the door. Betty brought him coffee without being asked. The jukebox played something old and country. A few truckers came in from the cold and sat at the counter. At 8:47, exactly the time two children had fallen through that door 4 months ago, Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Short, no punctuation. "Next time you're in Portland, maybe we could get coffee." Jack looked at the message. He looked at the empty bench across from him. He looked at the second plate. He slid it to the edge of the table. He caught Betty's eye. She came over without a word and cleared it away for the last time. And she did it the way Betty did everything, without asking, without explaining, as if she had understood the whole story all along, because she probably had. Jack put his phone away. He drank his coffee, and outside in the Nevada dark, the desert stretched on in every direction, vast and indifferent and ancient. The same desert that had swallowed 30 miles of a boy's courage on a stormy October night. The same desert that held the road to Portland, and the road to Betty's, and the road to a garage where money went out every month, to make sure women and children had somewhere to go, and someone to open the door. Some men spend their whole lives becoming the thing they feared most. And some men, not many and not easily, and never without cost, spend the second half of their lives becoming the thing someone needed them to be the first time around. Jack Thorne was a slow learner, but he got there. And the most dangerous thing about him, it turned out, was not his size or his record or his patch or his reputation. It was the fact that when a starving child walked up to his table in a rainstorm and asked for his leftovers, he slid the plate across and told the truth. Leftovers are scraps. Sit down and eat like human beings. Some people live their whole lives waiting for someone to say exactly that. And the ones who finally hear it never forget who said it. Neither does anyone who is watching. Jack finished his coffee. He stood up from the booth. He put on his jacket and nodded to Betty behind the counter. She nodded back. That small acknowledgement that passes between people who have witnessed something together. He walked to the door, pushed it open. The night air hit him cold and clean. His Harley was waiting where he had left it. He got on, started the engine, the familiar rumble. He thought about tomorrow, Saturday, the first Saturday in a long time where he didn't have to carry something heavy through it. He thought about the garage, the work waiting. He thought about the fund for Margaret, the weekly dinners at Betty's. He thought about a phone call he might make next week to Portland, to a daughter who had said maybe. Maybe was enough. For now. Maybe was a door that had been closed for 15 years, standing open just a crack. He rode out of the parking lot, turned onto the highway. The road stretched ahead, empty, dark, but he knew where it went. And for the first time in 27 years, Jack Thorne wasn't riding away from something. He was riding toward it.